I did want to talk about some of the things, some of my thoughts on last night's. I'm reluctant to call it a debate because it wasn't really a debate. I mean, in a debate, you have a premise, and then you have someone who defends the premise and somebody who opposes the premise, and they go back and forth. And this was not even anything resembling a debate. This was an interview by Fox News. Now, it was what seemed like a hostile interview, especially to Donald Trump in some cases, and sometimes it was a softball interview, but it was an interview. And the interviewers determined the topics. And, of course, the interviewers were Fox so-called news, so there was no discussion about economic inequality whatsoever last night. The greatest crisis facing us right now, climate change, the possibility of rapid, a rapid cascading series of tipping points being hit, producing out-of-control climate change, at least in those terms, was never discussed. John Kasich kind of sort of came close to mentioning something about global warming, but it wasn't touched. Citizens United wasn't discussed. Or maybe it was in the form of Donald Trump saying, I can buy any politician I want. I bought half the people on this stage. Claiming that he had bought Hillary Clinton and therefore she had to come to his wedding. There was no discussion of student debt. There was no discussion of terrorism by white supremacists who have executed about twice as many deaths. They've killed about twice as many people in this country since 9/11 as have so-called Muslim terrorists. So the topic area was fairly narrow, and within that fairly narrow topic area, I thought one of the more bizarre comments of the night was Scott Walker's saying that if a mother has a pregnancy that's gone wrong and she is dying, and this happens, it used to be a lot of women died in childbirth. It's just like, becoming pregnant was a life-threatening condition. It still is, but the odds are much greater that a woman will survive it. But basically, Megyn Kelly pressing Scott Walker on this, saying, are you sure? You would rather have the woman die than the child, than the unborn baby, than the fetus? And he was like, yeah, I'd rather have the woman die. Well, the fetus might be a man. It might be a male fetus. This is clip number 14, Jim. This is that, at least a piece of that discussion.
Would you really let a mother die rather than have an abortion? And with 83% of the American public in favor of a life exception, are you two out of the mainstream on this issue to win the general election?
Well, I'm pro-life. I've always been pro-life. And I've got a position I think is consistent with many Americans out there in that I believe that is an unborn child that's in need of protection out there. And I've said many a time that unborn child can be protected, and there are many other alternatives that will also protect the life of that mother.
Right. He apparently has some magic medical knowledge that the rest of us don't know about. But this is very bizarre. I wanted to talk before we get in. We've got a whole bunch of clips here. In fact, Shane and Shane was up half the night putting these things together, and thank you for that, Shane and Danielle. And I think we've got enough to last for a week, which we may well use. And but I wanted to talk about a larger frame for a second, and that is, and this is a question that's like almost never mentioned, never discussed. But who's doing what and why? To whose benefit did last night's debate happen? And and I'm not talking about which of the candidates. And once the primary beneficiary of last night's so-called debate is identified, what does that tell us about what their strategy might be? Well, the beneficiary is Fox so-called news. They had their best ratings last night, over 10 million people watching. 16% of all Americans watching TV were watching Fox so-called news. It's the best they've ever done. So they made money. Keep in mind, Fox so-called News is part of News Corp. News Corp is a for-profit corporation. Now, follow this logic. This might just be a little too strange for some folks, but I'm just telling you. I've done this radio show when we've had a Republican president, George W. Bush, and when we've had a Democratic president, Barack Obama. And I can tell you that a progressive radio show's ratings go up when there's a Republican president and go down when there's a Democratic president. And, you know, it's not a huge swing, but it's there and it's noticeable. And the flip side of that is true. When Bill Clinton became president, Rush Limbaugh had just gone on the air. And it was the Bill, well, he'd been on the air for a couple of years, but he hadn't caught any kind of, Limbaugh went on the air in 87, which, next to the last year of Reagan's presidency. But it really wasn't until 5 years later when Bill Clinton became president in 92 or 93 that Rush Limbaugh's show really, really took off. So from Fox News's point of view, how do they make the most money? They make the most money with a Democrat in the White House. Now, from NBC's point of view, they've got a perceived to be left-leaning channel in MSNBC. How do they maximize the profit of MSNBC? Have a Republican in the White House. Just chew on that for a minute and start noticing some of the programming decisions that are being made, both on Fox and on MSNBC, and more importantly, how they're treating the political candidates. Because by basically setting Donald Trump up to run for a third-party candidacy last night and being hostile toward him, Fox News might have just accomplished the thing that will guarantee them an extra, $300, $400, $500 million, maybe $1 billion, maybe a couple $1 billion in profits over the next 4 years. And that is, or over the next 6 years, you got another year and a half of the Obama presidency. And that is that if Trump runs as a third-party candidate, he'll pull votes from the Republicans, and either Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, Martin O'Malley, who, by the way, will become president, which is a good thing for Fox News in terms of a business decision. Now, I could argue that it would be better for my business if a Republican became president, but I'm right up front telling you all this stuff, and I do not want a Republican to become president.
Gentlemen, we know how much you love hand-raising questions. So we promise this is the only one tonight, the only one. Is there anyone on stage, and can I see hands, who is unwilling tonight to pledge your support to the eventual nominee of the Republican Party and pledge to not run an independent campaign against that person? Again, we're looking for you to raise your hand now. Raise your hand now if you won't make that pledge tonight. Mr. Trump. So, Mr. Trump, to be clear, you're standing on a Republican primary debate.
I fully understand.
The place where the RNC will give the nominee the nod.
I fully understand.
And that experts say an independent run would almost certainly hand the race over to Democrats and likely another Clinton. You can't say tonight that you can make that pledge.
I cannot say. I have to respect the person that if it's not me, the person that wins. If I do win and I'm leading by quite a bit, that's what I want to do. I can totally make that pledge. If I'm the nominee, I will pledge I will not run as an independent. But and I am discussing it with everybody, but I'm talking about a lot of leverage. We want to win, and we will win. But I want to win as the Republican. I want to run as the Republican nominee.
So tonight you can't say if another one of these...
This is what's wrong. This is what's wrong. He buys and sells politicians of all stripes. He's already.
Dr. Paul.
Hey, look. He's already hedging his bet on the Clintons. Okay, so if he doesn't run as a Republican, maybe he supports Clinton, or maybe he runs as an independent.
Okay.
But I'd say that he's already hedging his bets because he's used to buying politicians.
Well, I've given him plenty of money.
Just to be clear, you can't make it. We're going to move on. You're not going to make the pledge tonight.
I will not make the pledge at this time.
Okay. All right.